welcome to another edition of Mulligan Speakers International MSI Showcase. I'm Diane Mulligan, president of Mulligan Speakers International. Each week we invite our speakers to come on and talk about timely topics so you, the meeting planner, can get a better idea of their passions and also their excellent ability to integrate current events into their areas of expertise. Today we're working with Villalobos and Aimee Cohen, and we're so glad to have both of you here. Welcome, Aimee. First, tell me a little bit about you.
Hi, Diane. Thank you. My name is Aimee Cohen, owner of Cohen Career Consulting. For more than 17 years, I've been a career expert, a coach, a speaker, and my primary passion is to help clients, primarily women, not only in job transition, but also to really empower them in the workplace. I'm also a wife of 18 years, and we have 2 teenage kids.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Aimee, for coming today. I appreciate it. And hi, Michelle. How are you today?
Hi, Diane. I'm fine, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, I help people, especially women, learn to communicate more effectively in business. I deliver workshops, seminars, trainings, fun, interactive programs that help women with certain things that they struggle with in business, particularly how to sell, market, and promote themselves more effectively. On the side, I like to dance. I do salsa, merengue, hip-hop, anything you put at me, I like to do it.
Oh, fun. That sounds like a great time. Well, today we're talking about female rivalry. I just love this topic because I think all of us deal with it, and it's important for both men and women. And Michelle recently wrote an article, and she called it Why Women Play Dirty. It was very interesting in the article, and something that really surprised me was that we know that bullying is a problem in the workplace. And what's interesting is that men tend to bully differently than women. When men bully, they bully seems equally between men and women. But yet, Michelle, in just one of the many studies you cite, it surprised me to read that men bully differently than women. Men bully equally between the sexes, but you cited that women bully women more than 70% of the time. Why do you think that's the case? And do you think that it's important for corporations and associations to consider dealing with female rivalry because of the toll it can take on teamwork and productivity?
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, before we dig into that statistic, it's important to note that could be interpreted in 2 ways. Number one is the obvious way, which is that women bully women more often than they bully men. Or the other way is that women perceive that they are being bullied even when a woman does the same thing that a man would do. So we have to be really careful about some of these statistics because both interpretations are meaningful, but they mean different things. So, and then to answer the second part of your question, yes, absolutely. This is something that can really take a toll on an organization because women have evolved ways to compete throughout evolution, sociologically, culturally, but those ways of competing are very different. Men compete more upfront, more physically, more aggressively. Women tend to compete in a more relational way. So that can go under the surface and it can really hinder overall behavior. If your team is required to collaborate and work together, you want to be careful that there's not a lot of undermining going on in the background. So yes, very important to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And Aimee, you work with so many people during the job transitions. It would seem to me that this topic could absolutely be an issue as far as why people decide to change jobs. Is that true?
Well, it's enormously true right now. A new study just showed that 40% of employed workers are considering making a move. And what that does to organizations and to corporations is, first of all, turnover costs millions of dollars. But really on an organizational level, you have to look at why people are so dissatisfied, especially women. And it's often attributed to either a toxic work environment, it's unhealthy, they're not feeling productive or valued or fulfilled. There are a lot of things going on, and oftentimes when you delve a little deeper, there's usually one person who is at the root of making this a very unhappy work environment for someone. So yes, many people are considering making a move right now.
Very interesting. When you talk about toxic work environment, there are 2 words that come up very often, which is jealousy and envy. But Michelle, you tell us in your article that they can be good, but they can also be bad, and that it's very interesting to look at them from both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. In fact, they're neither good nor bad. Jealousy and envy just are. They exist, and they actually have an evolutionary purpose. They've played a role in helping us compete as human beings so that we can move forward as a species. So the idea of having jealousy or envy, for example, let's say if you're envious of something else, it might drive you to go out and be better. So as long as you can channel jealousy and envy the right way, it can actually be beneficial to you. And in terms of how, the one consideration, though, is because of the way we've evolved physically and biologically, jealousy and envy are usually in women centered around two things: appearance and social influence. So you can already imagine what kind of an impact that might have in a workplace with all those unspoken hierarchies and social intrigue and gossip.
Absolutely. And I would guess, too, Aimee, when you're going in for an interview, especially if it's a woman going in for an interview with a female boss, you have to think about these issues. How would you deal with them, and what would you say to your audiences about that?
You absolutely have to strongly consider that, because first and foremost, women, when they're interviewing, you never want to be perceived as a threat. And the interviewing process is really a process of elimination and, most importantly, of judgment. So to really echo what Michelle was saying, clothing is very important, because immediately that female interviewer is going to judge. That first impression is critical. So you always want to appear professional. You want to appear empowered, and you really want to be prepared for that interview so you don't come off as a threat. You come off as an equal player in that environment, because especially right now, never underestimate the paranoia about job security right now. So threat is important. You are just there to contribute.
Excellent, excellent. And Michelle, sometimes when you're interviewing with those women who have made it to the top, they have what you term queen bee syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, I wish I'd come up with that terminology, but somebody else did. It's a great word, and it's basically, the idea is that back in the 70s when women, entered the workplace, and we've been in, hospitals as nurses and in schools as teachers, but this is really the first time that women were coming into corporate America, into attorneys' offices, and into a different environment, a male environment. So what happened was the women that would come in, and often it was just one, like a token female, would come in, and then she quickly realized that it was a dog-eat-dog world, and she needed to compete in a more overt and aggressive way. So what would happen is these women, in order to be successful, they adopted a lot of male characteristics, male approach to doing business. And then what would happen is another woman would come along, and she might feel threatened, as Aimee pointed out. So she would adopt the sort of queen bee approach, where it's only me, I'm the only one, and I'm going to keep all the other women out. And it's dangerous, and it happens a lot. I've actually worked for a queen bee myself, and I know a lot of other women who have too.
Absolutely. And Aimee, when you have someone who's coming to you and she says, I am working for a woman of this type, and she says, I'm thinking about looking, what's your advice?
Well, my advice is, especially when it's a really competitive job market right now as it is, my advice is to always try to stay and make it work. That's really going to be the most successful route. And if you can try to play the political game and try to, in the survivor terminology, try to gain as many alliances as possible and try to play the game. And if that doesn't work, my advice is to always do not act impulsively. Do not just jump out of the frying pan into the fire and try to make a transition. Be prepared. Research your market. Get your resume in order. Build up your network so you can actually have a much more successful transition to hopefully a much better and healthier work environment.
Great advice. And Michelle, when you're in that environment, it also can change depending on how many men, how many women, and where the men and women are placed. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's so interesting when you start paying attention to workplace dynamics. And it's so helpful to understand the dynamic of your workplace, either the one you're in or where you're going into. So, for example, you want to ask yourself, what's the official power structure here in terms of male-female? And also, what's the unofficial power structure? When I say unofficial, I'm talking about the backroom stuff, like who's got access to information, who's got access to the power. It's very different when it's an all-female environment with female bosses, female workers. It's very different than, for example, an environment which is female with just one or two or a few male bosses. So you can imagine you can have, in that kind of environment, which I worked in for 7.5 years, you have a lot of women competing for attention, for favors, for promotions. to a group of men who have the power at the top. That's a very different environment from, say, one where it's reversed. So you want to be paying attention to that dynamic, because that's going to impact the kind of environment you're working in.
Certainly it will. And Aimee, how would you tell people to ferret that information out, and how much should that be considered in the final job selection?
Well, there's a lot to take into consideration in the decision-making process when considering an offer, but my feeling is to always listen to your intuition. You know if you are genuinely getting along with that person that you're interviewing with. When you walk around that workplace, which I highly recommend, getting a tour, meet the other workers, get a feel for the environment, and then ask yourself very honestly, is this someplace that I feel comfortable? Is this a place that I can thrive? Am I being true to myself when I am looking at them and saying, could I work for that person? Does that person has my best interests at heart? Your intuition will tell you a lot, and you need to listen to it.
Great advice. And Michelle, you have the last word. What advice would you leave your audiences with on this topic?
I would definitely reiterate what Aimee said. And remember, it's not all negative. I mean, it's not all challenges either. Women bring amazing skills to the table, amazing qualities to the table. One of those is intuition. So starting to listen to that and really give it the place that it deserves in your decision-making process is important. I would start paying attention to female rivalry and admit it. Admit that it exists, and don't try to avoid it or pretend it's not there. You need to be honest with it in the world around you, and also honest about it within yourself. We do have it. It's part of who we are as human beings. So let's take it, understand it, and use it to become more successful rather than hide from it or, have it as a dirty little secret. So admit it, and then take advantage of what you can glean by being educated on this stuff.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michelle Villalobos, and thank you so much, Aimee Cohen. I can't tell you how much we've enjoyed talking to you today. I hope that all of you out there will join us next week for another edition of MSI Showcase. I'm Diane Mulligan, president of Mulligan Speakers International. We look forward to working with you to provide transformational speakers and trainers who will make a lasting impact on your audience. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.